You wake before the alarm and without thinking. You reach for a face you cannot touch, not the literal skin, but the arrangement of expressions, the practiced tilt of the head, the voice tuned to whatever room awaits you. It is seamless now, almost weightless, a mask that breathes when you do. You believe it is you. You believe you chose it. And yet, if you listen closely, you can hear the faint whisper of stage curtains sliding open. The day begins like a play that never ends. Hallways become corridors to the wings. The meeting table is a set dressed in glass and chrome, and the screen in your palm is a glowing proscenium where you audition again and again for approval. Lines appear on cue, gestures land, the audience, everyone, and no one answers with their small applause. A nod, a like, a salary, a promise. Each response tightens the mask by a thread you barely feel. It did not arrive all at once. It grew from tiny bargains. Be agreeable to stay safe. Be competent to be valued. To be impressive to be chosen. Those bargains hardened into costume. Soon, habit became identity and identity became defense. You learned how to enter every scene already edited. The smile slightly brighter than the mood. The certainty louder than the doubt. The silence where truth should have been. You became the character the story required. And then, late, always late, there comes a moment between scenes when the lighting fails and you are left in a softer dark. In that hush, your reflection in a window asks a private question. Who is watching this performance from behind your eyes? If you are entirely the role, who is the witness that notices the role? The question does not accuse, it invites, it points to a door you forgot was there. Step toward it and notice the body loosening as the script loosens. Notice how relief arrives before explanation. The theater is still the theater, but something in you moves from stage to seat, from character to consciousness. You can feel breath without arranging it, hear thoughts without obeying them, sense emotions without being carried away. You do not have to rip the mask away, you only have to see it as a mask. From that seeing, a gentler freedom begins. The day's scenes still ask for your lines, but you deliver them with light in your hands instead of chains at your wrists. Approval matters less than presence. Control gives way to cooperation. You discover you can bow without disappearing, speak without defending, act without pretending. The show goes on, and you are no longer lost inside it. Freedom begins the moment you realize you were never the character, only the awareness behind it. Most of us don't notice how early the rehearsal starts. As children, we study the faces of adults, like mirrors that decide whether we are lovable. We learn quickly that truth is negotiable, but approval is not. When we cry too loud, someone says, "Be good." When we speak honestly, someone says, "That's not polite." Little by little, we trade authenticity for safety and call it growing up. By the time we are old enough to choose our own words, the voice inside has already been dubbed over. We grow into adults who perform competence instead of living curiosity, who chase admiration instead of connection. The costume changes, but the purpose stays the same, to keep the applause coming. At work, we wear professionalism like armor. Among friends, we wear humor to hide fatigue. In love, we wear charm because tenderness feels too dangerous. Even in solitude, we keep rehearsing, scrolling through images of who we think we should be. We are actors who never step off stage, terrified that the silence might expose what we no longer recognize, the unmasked self. Every culture trains its cast differently, but the story is universal. We are told that to be someone, we must become someone else. We must build a resume, a reputation, a reflection others approve of. And so we polish our masks until they shine so brightly they blind us. The tragedy is not that the world asks us to perform, it's that we forget it's a performance at all. We confuse the lines we repeat with the language of the soul. We start believing that the applause means we're alive. But beneath the glitter of the play, The body remembers. It whispers its discontent in sleepless nights, in the ache between breaths, in the quiet panic that visits when the phone dies and there is nowhere left to perform. That panic is not emptiness, it's recognition. It's the moment when the actor realizes the script has gone missing. For a brief, trembling instant, there are no lines to say, no role to hold, only the raw presence that has been waiting behind the curtain since the first scene. Look around. The whole society hums with the anxiety of continuous acting. We try to manage impressions the way we manage finances, constantly balancing, adjusting, editing. We decorate the cage of image and call it freedom. We curate personalities like portfolios and wonder why love feels like negotiation. We speak of authentic living, but even authenticity becomes another performance when the spotlight never dims. The truth is simple, almost embarrassingly simple. The person you think you are is a mask stitched together from memory, habit, and fear. It's not evil, just incomplete. It helped you survive. It just cannot help you awaken. To live entirely through that mask is to trade infinite possibility for predictability, awareness for image, aliveness for applause. And yet, a few dare to take it off because to remove it, even for a second, feels like dying. That's why awakening often begins with exhaustion, not enlightenment. When the weight of pretending finally exceeds the comfort it brings, something inside begins to crack. And through that crack, light enters not to destroy the mask, but to remind you, you were never it. The play continues, but you are no longer bound to the script. Every story you've ever told about who you are was written by a voice that is not you. It began softly, whispering through the words of parents, teachers, friends, be like this, not like that. Those words became beliefs, and beliefs became a boundary around your being. By the time you learned to say I, the voice had already decided what I meant. You didn't choose the character, you inherited it. And like a method actor who never leaves the role, you grew to love and fear the mask in equal measure. The ego is not your enemy. It is an ingenious invention, a character designed to navigate a world of form. It learns language, traits, relationships, stories. It wants to keep you safe. But in its effort to protect, it begins to confuse protection with possession, survival with identity. It believes that without control, you would vanish. So it grips tighter to opinions, to memories, to pain. It doesn't care whether you are happy. It only cares that you remain someone. And this, quietly, is the trap. The ego thrives on drama because drama affirms existence. A quiet mind feels like death to it, because silence exposes its illusion. That's why it constantly seeks friction through argument, comparison, ambition, desire. It needs conflict to prove itself real, like an actor who demands more lines to stay relevant. The ego fears being written out of the script. So it keeps talking, even when you're alone. It whispers, you should be more, you're not enough, they're better. You listen because the voice speaks in the language of familiarity, the only voice you think you have, but who hears that voice? The question cuts deeper than philosophy. It is a blade that divides illusion from reality. The one who hears is not the voice. The one who sees the thoughts passing is not a thought. You are the space in which the mask appears, not the mask itself. Consciousness, pure, silent, unchanging, has been watching the play all along. You've mistaken the reflection for the mirror. Imagine a stage lit by a single spotlight. In its beam, an actor performs every emotion: joy, grief, rage, love. Now imagine the light turning inward, realizing it has never been affected by the performance it illuminated. The spotlight doesn't weep when the character dies, it doesn't rejoice when the hero wins. It simply shines. That light is awareness, and you are that light. When you begin to see this, the world doesn't dissolve, it deepens. People still speak, plans still unfold. but the tension that ruled your every move begins to soften. You stop taking the lines so personally. You no longer need every scene to end perfectly because you know it was never about the ending. It was always about awakening within the act itself. The more clearly you see, the more lightly you move. This seeing is not a belief. It's not something to practice or achieve. It's a remembering, a shift from being the mask to being the witness of it. It happens in a breath, in a pause between thoughts, in the moment you realize you are watching yourself worry. That tiny space is the doorway to freedom, and once you notice it, it begins to widen. From there, every thought becomes a line in the script. Every emotion, a costume change. Every experience, a scene meant to be watched, not owned. The mind will resist. It will call this detachment laziness, even nihilism. But it's none of those. It's clarity, the realization that life's beauty was never in the roles, but in the awareness that animates them. When you stop mistaking the actor for the light, something miraculous happens. The play becomes real again, not because it defines you, but because you finally see it for what it is, a living art of consciousness expressing itself. The ego still speaks, but you no longer bow to it. You smile at its tantrums, its insecurities, its ambitions, knowing they are just echoes of an old performance. You no longer need to silence it. You simply stop believing it. And in that disbelief, peace arises, not the peace of a perfect scene, but the peace of the theater itself, vast and silent, holding every story with equal love. There was once a woman who everyone admired. She was confident, articulate, successful, the kind of person who seemed to have rehearsed every moment of life to perfection. People called her the woman who has it all. And in every photo she did, her laughter was contagious, her opinions clever, her posture unshakable. But every night, after the applause of the day had faded and the city lights dimmed, she would sit by her window and stare at her own reflection until the smile collapsed. What she saw wasn't sadness exactly, it was emptiness, like a forgotten backstage between scenes. She could no longer tell whether she was still performing or finally alone. The voice inside her whispered lines, even when there was no audience. Be grateful. Don't overthink. You're lucky. But the words sounded hollow, like echoes in an abandoned theater. Something in her chest ached, not from pain, but from the weight of pretending. One evening, after another flawless dinner with friends, she returned home and turned off every light. She didn't want music. She didn't want noise. She wanted, for once, to feel nothing. She sat on the floor in the dark and listened, really listened. At first, there was only the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of a clock. Then, beneath that, she heard something deeper, her own breathing. It was uneven, almost shy, as if it had been waiting years to be noticed. In that moment, tears came not from sadness, but recognition. The breath was real, the performance was not. She remembered being a child, standing behind a curtain during a school play, terrified yet exhilarated. She remembered the teacher whispering, "Just be yourself." She remembered walking onto the stage and, for the first time, feeling the light not as something to fear, but as something warm and infinite. That memory returned now. Decades later, like a small truth breaking through heavy layers of costume, somewhere along the line, she had mistaken the stage for the world and the light for judgment. In that darkness, a strange calmness filled the room. She realized she didn't need to destroy the mask or hate the performance. She simply needed to remember that it was a performance. She whispered to herself, "It's okay to stop." The words felt dangerous, almost rebellious, as if she had broken some unspoken rule of existence. But instead of chaos, there was peace. Nothing collapsed. The world outside continued exactly as before. Only one thing had changed. She no longer believed the act. The next morning, she still went to work, still greeted her colleagues, still played her part, but something subtle was different. Her laughter was softer. not because she forced it, but because she no longer needed it to prove anything. Her words carried pauses, small silences that let meaning breathe. And sometimes, in the middle of a conversation, she'd feel the quiet joy of knowing that behind every word there was stillness. She was watching herself act, and that watching was freedom. Weeks passed. The world still called her the woman who has it all. But inside, she smiled at the cosmic joke, because now she knew she had never been the woman at all. She was the space in which that woman appeared, lived, and disappeared each day. She was the awareness that watched the curtain rise and fall. And once you see that, the performance becomes beautiful again. Not because it defines you, but because you finally understand you were the light shining on the stage all along. The story of that woman is not rare. It's the story of nearly everyone you meet. The only difference is that some have learned to wear their masks more gracefully. Walk down any street and you'll see thousands of small performances in motion. The polite smiles, the curated conversations, the invisible scripts. We move through cities like actors between scenes, adjusting tone, posture, vocabulary, even morality, depending on the audience. And in this collective theater we call society, no one dares to drop the act first. We scroll through masks as if shopping for identities. We fall in love with other masks, compare them, envy them, compete with them. We spend fortunes maintaining costumes we secretly long to shed, and then we call it connection. But how can two characters truly meet when both are pretending to be real? How can love flourish between shadows of authenticity? The tragedy of modern life isn't that we perform, it's that we've mistaken the performance for reality. Humanity has become a hall of mirrors, each reflection echoing another reflection. We've built systems that reward appearance more than essence, education that prizes memorization over curiosity, careers that honor productivity over presence, social media that measures worth in pixels of attention. And yet, beneath all that performance, consciousness hums like a forgotten song, waiting for someone to listen again. The theater is crowded, but the silence behind it is infinite. Sometimes awakening feels like rebellion. When you stop pretending, the world around you may look confused. You might lose audiences, roles, or even entire scenes that once defined your existence. But what you gain is far greater: the ability to see the play without being trapped by it. You begin to recognize the sacred in the ordinary. You see that even the masks have beauty when you no longer mistake them for the truth. It's easy to think awakening means quitting your job, renouncing society, or refusing to participate. But the truth is gentler. Awakening doesn't ask you to abandon the play only to know it for what it is. You can still act, love, build, and dream, but you do so consciously, without losing the witness inside. You start to live from awareness rather than reaction, from stillness rather than seeking. And paradoxically, your performance becomes more alive, more spontaneous, more compassionate, because it's no longer weighed down by fear. When consciousness awakens within a character, something miraculous happens. The mask begins to smile on its own. The gestures become lighter, the voice softer, the eyes clearer. The world hasn't changed, you have. You've shifted from being the actor to being the awareness that animates the actor. And from that shift, love flows naturally, because there's no longer anyone to defend. You see yourself in every face, hear yourself in every voice. This realization doesn't remove you from life, it roots you more deeply in it. You can laugh at the absurdity, cry at the beauty, and still remain untouched at the core. That's the paradox of awakening. You become fully human only when you realize you were never just human. The divine and the ordinary meet right here, on this stage we call the world. And once you see the play clearly, you can finally enjoy it, not as a prisoner of roles, but as the light that makes every story possible. Transformation rarely begins with fireworks. It begins with noticing a small, quiet seeing that shifts everything. You don't need to tear off the mask or burn the script. You simply pause long enough to realize that you're wearing one. That single awareness, I'm acting right now, is already the beginning of freedom. Start small. When someone praises you, feel the subtle tension that wants to preserve the image they admire. When someone criticizes you, notice the sting, the urge to defend the character. In both cases, the ego steps forward and says, "That's me." But if you stay still, if you breathe before responding, you'll sense a space between the reaction and the witness of it. That space is the doorway home. It's where awareness lives, silently observing without judgment. To live from that awareness doesn't mean abandoning the play. It means playing consciously. You still have roles to fulfill: parent, partner, friend, creator, but you hold them lightly, like garments worn for a time, not as your essence. You can change roles without losing yourself, because the self you now know isn't confined to any costume. It's the stage beneath them all. The world may not understand this new rhythm at first. People who are still lost in the performance might call you distant or strange. They'll sense that something about you no longer depends on their approval. And they'll either be drawn to it or frightened by it, because awakening is contagious, but also unsettling. You've stepped out of the dream they're still defending. Your silence becomes a mirror that shows them their own masks. And not everyone wants to see that reflection. So walk gently. Do not preach or correct. Simply be. Truth, when lived rather than spoken, has its own gravity. When others see you unbothered by praise or blame, they feel the weight of a freedom they've forgotten. Your calm becomes an invitation. You remind them that there's another way to exist, one that doesn't depend on applause, competition, or constant proving. The art of awakening is not about perfection. It's about intimacy with the present. When the mind rushes ahead to plan or rewinds to regret, just notice awareness is already there, watching both movements. The noticing itself dissolves the illusion of control. Each time you see through a thought, a small piece of the mask turns transparent. Eventually, the whole structure becomes light enough to laugh through. You might think this sounds passive, but it's the opposite. To live from awareness is to engage with life completely, not through filters, but directly. When you eat, you taste. When you walk, you feel the earth. When you listen, you truly listen. Every action becomes meditation. Every breath a rehearsal for presence. The ordinary becomes sacred because nothing stands between you and what is. Sometimes the old voice of the ego will return, demanding to be heard. It will say, "You're losing yourself," but you'll smile gently and answer, "Exactly." Because losing the false self is not a loss, it's the only true gain. It's the difference between breathing through a mask and breathing freely in the open air. Over time, the boundaries between actor and audience blur completely. You find yourself both in the scene and beyond it, fully participating yet profoundly detached. You laugh more easily, cry more honestly, love without bargaining. The play hasn't changed, but your relationship with it has. You've stopped fighting for control and started dancing with the unfolding. And in that dance, you discover a rhythm older than thought, the rhythm of being itself. It asks nothing of you except this: be here, fully, now. Everything else, the script, the costume, the applause, will take care of itself. When you live from this space, even the mask smiles. It knows it was never the enemy. It was just a teacher pointing you back to what was always true. You were never the character. You were never the story. You were always the awareness watching it all unfold. Imagine the theater after everyone has gone home. The lights dim, the air still carries the warmth of the crowd, and on the stage rests a single chair beneath a silent spotlight. No music, no dialogue, no movement, only space. That space is what remains when the performance ends. It's what remains when every role you've ever played finally bows out. Sit there for a moment, inside yourself, as if you are sitting in that empty theater. Notice how still it feels. You can almost hear your own existence breathing. There's no need to name it, to analyze it, or to decorate it with meaning. It's enough just to be aware of being aware. That's the presence you've been chasing through every mask, every role, every dream of becoming. You never needed to earn it. You only needed to remember it. This is what freedom truly is, not a grand escape, not enlightenment struck by lightning, but the gentle recognition that you were never bound. All the walls were made of imagination. All the masks were costumes in a play that consciousness wrote for its own amusement. And the moment you stop mistaking yourself for the character, the moment you stop trying to fix or perfect the story, you realize that even the play itself is sacred. From this stillness, life continues exactly as before, but with a lightness that cannot be taught. You still wake up, speak, work, love, laugh, but now there's space between every breath. There's a knowing behind every action, the awareness watching quietly through your eyes. And in that awareness, the world glows differently. You start to see that nothing was ever personal. Every joy, every pain, every meeting and parting was simply the dance of the divine pretending to forget itself. So when the curtain falls again tonight, and it will, as it always does, remember that the play was never the point. The point was to awaken inside it, to remember the truth while still dressed in costume. You can keep acting, but act consciously. You can keep loving, but love freely. You can keep living, but live lightly. Because the truth is not somewhere waiting to be found, it's what you are right now, in this breath, in this silence. Freedom begins the moment you realize you were never the character, only the awareness behind it. And once you know that, every act becomes holy, every mask becomes transparent, and every scene, even this one, ends in peace. If these words stirred something quiet inside you, don't rush to define it. Let it breathe. Sit with it for a moment longer, in the same stillness that listens beneath all noise. Because this isn't just an idea to remember, it's a truth to live. The play of life will go on, scenes will change, faces will come and go, but if you can carry this awareness with you, every moment becomes a doorway home. And if this message touched a hidden part of you, share it not to convince anyone, but to remind them they can remove the mask. 2, stay a while. Not with me, but with yourself. In silence, that's where freedom has always been waiting.